We'll go ahead and get started here. We are the only session apparently between you and a happier hour, so we'll be happy to go through this and then get on to that. I'd like to introduce our two guests. Our first is Mike. Mike, will you introduce yourself? Tell us, sorry, Erik. I did that.
It's the second time today.
I interviewed him today and I did perfect with his name at the beginning. Let me start over. I'm going to introduce Erik Pena.
Hi, I'm Erik Pena. I'm the product manager for Doverunner with a focus on multi-DRM. Based in Seattle. For those that are not familiar, Doverunner is a content security company based in Seoul, Korea, but we have offices in the US as well as in India as well.
And then Mark.
Yeah, I'm Mark Nakano. I'm the VP of Content Security at Warner Brothers. So we're just a little small studio.
All right, so Erik, first question. What is the impact of piracy on streaming?
It's a pretty big impact, as it turns out. The unfortunate thing is that it's very hard to calculate, just given the nature of different types of piracy, different avenues in which content can be captured, pushed back out there onto the internet, and then the audiences that are actually consuming the content. I did actually have some details that I can provide, which might add some idea of like around what the scale looks like. I wrote down notes because I'm not really good with numbers. So three of them, which I could find pretty easily. So in 2024, Copa America found that their content was on 71% of illicit sites. It's a pretty big number. Then you have Copa Subamericana, which were found on 80% of sites. So it turned out that their subsidiary was on more piracy websites. In 2024, IBCAP disrupted 6,723 streams. This made it out to 2.1 million views on Facebook Live. And that's just one channel, mind you, on Facebook Live. We're not talking about TikTok, YouTube, Telegram, so on and so forth, where I'm sure the viewership could have been a lot more. And then a sports platform, which I know the name, but I can't say it here. Please find me after this if you would like to know. They actually published this out on the web. They estimated about 28.3 billion pounds lost due to piracy. So it's pretty large. And these are just three different reports of which there was piracy.
Mark, do you have other examples of sort of the scale of piracy?
Like Erik said, it's hard to quantify it. I'm always asked this question, like how do you justify return on investment on piracy, right? And you really can't, right? I mean, some of the stuff that we've seen potentially, and this is not necessarily our service, but people say 30% of your traffic on your CDN is pirate, right? I heard statistics where I think for sports, just specifically for sports, they were saying like 60% of that viewership was piracy, right? So I don't know what the numbers are, but if you think about it, right, it's like, hey, how do I stop this? The biggest problem is, so let's say I stop the 30% or the 60%, right? Well, how many people am I converting? I have no idea. So that's the problem, is I can't justify, the piracy numbers, but like I said, we're seeing things like 30% of the traffic being unaccounted for. Now, it might not all be piracy, right? But 30% is not nothing.
It's interesting. A few years ago, Akamai did a study. They released it at NAB that year that said, and this was back more in the VOD days as opposed to the live days, and I think it may be even worse now. But they said that fundamentally, if there was a piece of content that came off a broadcast network, in the first 24 hours, people would try to find it legitimately. They'd look at the site of the company, they'd look at other sites. Knowing, though, that they were going to go to the office the next day and it would be water cooler conversation, if you missed that 24-hour window, then they were going to those sites that, weren't legitimate. That's sort of casual piracy, but what you're talking about is sort of professional piracy, where it's rebroadcasting at scale and that kind of thing. How easy is it to rebroadcast at scale?
All right. So in terms of like rebroadcasting, it can be defeated as easy as a $20 device that you can get on Amazon. Unfortunately, you can get these things. They're called HDMI splitters. If you are able to capture content and then pipe it through the splitter, you now have something that can be restreamed. It's very unfortunate, but it does happen. And so, yeah, we've also seen cases where something as simple as a Fire Stick, somebody could take that, figure out a way to kind of circumvent the live streaming aspect of things, and then resell Fire Sticks that have illicit applications on it that are capable of actually playing back that content.
And real quick before you go on, I was going to say one of the things that's interesting is the consumer electronics industry intentionally did the analog sunset a number of years ago to get rid of the ability to do analog outputs out of devices. The whole idea was using HDCP, which is the content protection, but you're saying essentially even after that analog sunset, there are devices that you can go out that just bypass HD.
And pirates are very crafty, right? They're going to find new ways of defeating any kind of security. And if you know security, you know that it's a whack-a-mole game, right? Like you find a new vulnerability, you figure out a way to patch it, but then, lo and behold, they will find a new way to kind of circumvent that even.
Yeah, so what Erik's talking about, it's called restreaming, right? So the disadvantage of restreaming is you have to get it, you have to then, host it somewhere, like your CDN, and then you have to stream it out to, your friends, right? But there's even something easier, which is called CDN leeching.
Okay.
So with CDN leeching is even easier because what you do is you basically have, let's say, one legitimate account, right? You go, you ask for, the soccer game or whatever, or the baseball game, because we're in playoffs right now, right?
Sure.
And so then you capture all that information. You capture where is the the URL basically of how do I get the data, and then you capture the key, right? And then all you have to do is you have to tell your friends, once again, you go, hey, go to this URL, and oh, here's the key, right? And now I don't even need infrastructure. I'm using your infrastructure to pirate all this stuff, right?
And what was interesting during the World Cup recently, and I had a panelist last year when we were talking about this, he said that not only was the CDN leeching working, but they were rebroadcasting and then putting DDoS attacks back against the original content broadcaster to make it more difficult for you to watch it legitimately. Therefore, you'd come and actively look for something like a CDN leech.
Yeah, and a reason why they would do something like that is because oftentimes when they do the restreaming, they're overlaying things over the top of the video, which might be like, what was it called, Gcash, I think it was, where you basically are donating to these illicit websites directly. And so the loss of monetization, because now you can't really access the original content and you have to go through these pirate websites, becomes even worse because now they're monetizing off of your content.
So forensic watermarking is something that I think you all have mentioned, you mentioned in the interview today. Describe a little bit of that to the audience.
Sure. So there's a couple different methods for watermarking. I'll refer to watermarking because there's two different methods. The first one that I'll mention is distributed watermarking, where essentially if you are a content house or studio and you have content that has not been released yet, you want to syndicate a screener to, to the media to be able to do a review on it. Usually you'll send this out and it'll be embedded inside the content will be identifiers to let anybody that is receiving that content know that, hey, this was originally intended for this particular outlet, we'll say the media. Sometimes it's visible. I think in a lot of cases you're going to see a lot of visible watermarking on the videos, but there are invisible methods as well. The thing about that is that for each outlet that you're sending your screener to, you have to create a new rendition of the content that gets sent out. That way, if it does get leaked, companies can then take a look and say, okay, we found this out on the web, who leaked it, and then interrogate the file, pull out the ID, and then be able to go back to whoever actually leaked the content for legal reasons. The second one, well, actually, first, on the distributed watermarking, as you can imagine, because it's one file per outlet, storage costs will explode because you have to now create multiple instances of it. And so it's not very scalable when it comes to like the end user side of things. That's where forensic watermarking comes into play. For that, content companies, as they're creating live streams or if they're creating VOD content, they'll pass it through a pipeline that will actually create 2 different renditions of the same content, which we call A and B. When that content's created, on the end user side, there will be a request for the content using either HLS or Dash. You get the package, the manifest that gets sent down. That is going to be conditioned to have these segments alternating in A and B frames. You can think of it as like binary, where you essentially are playing back content. The end user doesn't see it. They're just seeing the content play back. But what we're able to do is actually pull out the identifier because it's being played out through the actual sequence of content that's being played.
Mark, any additional comments on that in terms of sort of the forensic versus, visible versus invisible watermarking?
Yeah, I would say for watermarking, right, what it does is, 1, it traces who's leaking the content, right? But 2, what it also does is it makes us easier to figure out who is leaking the content, because like I said, it traces right now. So if we don't have watermarking, which most of the services don't, what do you have to do, right? You have to analyze a ton of logs, right? So you're analyzing DRM logs, you're analyzing CDN logs, and like our service has 100-something million subscribers, right? Can you imagine looking at a CDN log for 5 minutes of that? I mean, it's a huge amount of data, right? So forensic watermarking can kind of get around all of that, because now I don't have to analyze these logs. I could just go, oh, I know who leaked it. It's that guy, right? But like I said, it's not implemented in all the different streaming services.
So you mentioned. Go ahead.
Sorry, real quick. Another thing that is also very helpful is when you talk about like any kind of live event or sports that are being played out. You can set up a system in which you do have forensic watermarking, and as end users are watching it, if it does get repackaged, if it does get restreamed out there, content providers have a way of being able to find these streams and then be able to pick out the ID. Usually what happens is those streams are going to be DRM protected in some form or fashion. And so when the user ID is picked out, they can then trace it back to the actual offending account that is restreaming it and then cut off access. And if they set up things like key rotation, where a DRM license has to be retrieved every, let's say, 5 minutes, that user might have up to 5 minutes of playtime before their stream, not inexplicably, it is explicable, it gets cut off. And so now any of the viewers that are watching this illegal stream, they also get the black screen as well.
And that brings up an interesting point, because oftentimes if there's a baseball game or some other game and you go to try to find it on YouTube, you may be able to watch a few minutes of it and then suddenly it disappears. This is precisely why. That's
precisely why. There's also, on that particular item too, there are a lot of services, anti-piracy services, where there are teams of people just looking for this content on YouTube or just any social media. And as they see them, then they'll issue takedowns on behalf of those content houses. And you'll, like you said, you'll see YouTube just playing back content, and all of a sudden, it just cuts right off.
And that goes back to what I wanted to ask. You mentioned whack-a-mole before. Between the two of you, what are sort of the trends that companies are focusing on these days? Is it those teams of people, which could be really costly in and of itself? Is it automated systems? If I'm a company out there with premium content, where should I be focusing my effort?
Yeah, so I mean, most of these companies are going to have DRM already as part of their solution. It's just it's a licensing thing. You have to have it in there. But now they're starting to explore other avenues. So the forensic watermarking is we've been seeing a lot more requests and a lot more interest in that mechanism. Anti-piracy is also something that a lot of content providers utilize nowadays. Yeah.
So I was gonna say like a dirty little word. It's called AI. And so like when I was going back and saying, hey, we have these logs and there's like tons of logs, right? Like we can't process these by ourselves. So right now, I think not just us, but like everybody that has a streaming service that has live is probably experimenting with, hey, I'm going to use AI to analyze this data, and then I want that AI to tell me this stuff is weird, something weird's going on, right?
So it's essentially machine learning algorithms for anomaly detection.
Yeah, I can actually speak to that just a little bit. So at Doverunner, the company I work for, we are experimenting with AI in terms of anomaly detection. We're doing a couple different methods here. So one of them, we're looking at DRM license logs. We're trying to pick out any particular behaviors or attributes that might look suspicious. But we're also pulling in other data as well. And so, other than DRM license logs, we are going to have a CMCD integration where additional data can be sent over to us, and it just adds more context to the overall landscape of all the end users for a customer. And from that, like what we're hoping to be able to do is be able to say, okay, here of your content and how it's being consumed, here are the ones that are likely going to be suspicious. And this is going to be like the first phase that we have of just being able to detect and report back. At a certain point, once we have that trust, and I think this is probably where a lot of companies are at right now, they're trying to build the system so that it is accurate and efficient. And when they do get to that point, then they're going to have the auto block turned on. And so you'll start seeing cases or companies start offering AI ML as part of their overall product suite, and then with the automatic like auto ban or auto block feature turned on.
Did you want to add anything to that?
I just want to say there's already some companies that I know, or affiliates, or that I know of that do a lot of sports, and they've already implemented something like that where they have their machine learning, they're identifying accounts, and then they're within the first 5 minutes of a game or whatever, they're just like killing them.
So you mentioned DRM, and for the audience who may not know digital rights management systems, there were several systems that were at odds with one another. We finally came together, goodness, a decade ago and did common encryption scheme. Some of those obviously have thrived very well. Is DRM broken these days, or is there something that we need to do to make it work more effectively?
I think where we're at right now is DRM is a known quantity. It does what it needs to do, I think, for like the 90% of use cases. This is going to be for just the average person, maybe not necessarily tech elite in any sorts, just watching content, and so it's going to protect your streams in that I guess that realm. Now there are going to be like the 10% where you do have the pirates that are intentionally trying to figure out ways of kind of breaking past it, and there are ways to do it. We've seen cases of software and hardware encryption being defeated. For that, there are methods that you can apply to kind of help lessen it, of which like we actually have a product feature which we call license cipher. And what license cipher essentially is a two-way trust between the client and the server side, where essentially if a client does not have license cipher, it does not have the appropriate signatures being sent to their server side, those licenses will be rejected. So there's going to be, I wouldn't say that it's I can't remember the word you used exactly. Well, we'll just say flawed, but I would say it's not flawed. I think it's exactly where it should be right now, and until some of these DRM providers are adding additional features to kind of step up to like the more modern times of like how things are happening. But again, like this, at the end of the day, we're talking about security where things are going to continually evolve, including the efforts from hackers.
And Erik, I think we talked about this a little bit during our interview. One of the ideas there being CNC or the sort of three major DRM platforms have a good consistent baseline. Part of what you're looking at, and perhaps that's with things like license cipher, is adding additional features on top of it. Do we run the risk of incompatibility across platforms when it comes to adding these additional features?
No, because usually like these DRM companies are going to, well, first off, if there's an opportunity to make it so that it's consistent across the DRM flavors, they're going to do it. If it's not, then they're usually pretty good about calling out if it is only supported on specific platforms. A good example of this would be like high frequency key rotation, right? It's only supported on a couple different DRM systems. And you have to have a very specific, not infrastructure, but just a very specific setup to be able to support it. And so in those cases, like those companies will tell you, like, hey, you have to have a player, this particular player with this particular encoder with this particular DRM scheme, and usually like customers or companies will adopt that method.
And would it go so far as you have to have this particular CDN or instances of CDNs, or is it not that restrictive?
I don't think it's that restrictive.
Okay.
You're usually going to see like the restriction going to be mostly on the playback, the player side, and then the actual content preparation as well.
Okay, got it. So Mark, we talked a little bit about black screens, but how do content providers respond to these threats besides the innovative ideas that come out of the DRM companies?
So the only lever that we have is really resolution, right? Is depending on how secure something is, we can give them 4K resolution, right? Or if they're not secure, we can only give them standard definition, or we just black screen it, right? Where you're not even seeing anything. That's pretty much our, response that we usually do. What I'm kind of worried about right now is with that dirty word again, AI. AI is getting pretty good at upscaling stuff. So we might have to come and revisit, like, hey, how do we really control this? Because even if I give you standard definition, I've seen cases where they can upscale it to definitely, HD, maybe even 4K, and it still looks pretty good.
Interesting. Right. So that would be essentially the reverse extrapolation of the content from that standpoint.
Yeah. So right now, this is how we control it. We're like, hey, this platform is not good enough, so we're going to only do standard def, right? But I think in the future, and I've actually talked to some of the other studios about this, is we got to worry about AI because it's going to do a lot more stuff that they're going to be able to take this really crappy level of content and make it look really good.
So I'll just add an anecdote here. I went to speak to 6th and 7th graders, which is a much more real audience than an audience of professionals like this. One of the students asked me the question, how come when I screenshot what I'm watching to send to my friends, it's black? And I'm like, well, that's a feature, not a bug. And then I had to explain the legal ramifications around that. So from the various points at which security is needed, where do we see the biggest opportunity to protect content? We have content at rest, we have content in transport, et cetera, and I'll open that up to both of you.
So we actually have, in our contracts, we say you have to encrypt everything at rest and transit, right? So we don't necessarily specify the exact encryption you use, but we basically say it has to be encrypted, right? Okay. So we make sure that that's being done, and that's pretty much in our contracts.
I work for a content security company, and so what you're going to hear from me is, and I think this is pretty applicable, is you want to come at it from like the Tetsudo effect, which if you're not familiar with it, it's from the Roman times where actually it's very familiar to like the movie 300, where they created the shield that created this big giant shield out of many shields. It's not about just one particular thing that's going to protect against content piracy. It's going to be about many things that are going to help you protect against content piracy. And so things like DRM, forensic watermarking, mobile app security to make sure that people are not taking your apps for iOS and Android, cracking it open and figuring out how to circumvent DRM or just get access to the content. All those different things are going to be what companies need to be able to protect against anti-piracy, and that could evolve. There could be cases where maybe tomorrow forensic watermarking is rendered, useless, but then something else might come out. And so, constantly staying above the mark on what kind of threats exist out there, and then making sure that your system is set up to be able to protect against it is going to be important.
Talk a little bit about mobile app security, because we really haven't talked about mobile here.
Yeah, so for mobile app security, this is going to be something where a lot of companies that do have apps for iOS or Android, they're going to put it out on Play stores. Oftentimes, the pirates are going to grab the actual binary, so IPA or APKs, and they're going to be able to decompile them, repackage them. We've even seen cases where, like on Android, they would take an app, they'll break it down, they'll add their own level of malware on top of the Android, repackage it, and somehow get it back into the Play Store for distribution, and the public grabs it thinking it's a legitimate app. But what they're installing is an application that actually has bad stuff in it. So whether it's their own ads to be able to monetize off ads within the app itself, or just tracking, or whatever the case may be, there's many different threats that will happen because of that. Additionally, for the mobile app security, it's going to do things like protect against real-time memory access. So if you have this app running, or repackaged app, it's going to restrict against hackers being able to look in the memory addresses and being able to pull out particular things that might be loaded into the memory of the device itself.
And it's interesting that you say that, because essentially all they have to do there is defeat the hashes in terms of being able to add things in after they've decompiled and recompiled.
Yep, exactly. And the way that you would protect against something like that is, like for us, we actually have a service which we call mobile app security, where you would take your binaries and actually upload it to our cloud. And what we do is we add additional code on top of the binary itself, and it protects against people from being able to pull it open, repackage it, and doing all the things that I just listed off.
So, Mark, from your standpoint, mobile app security, how important is that compared to, say, connected TV versus, say, other platforms?
So that's more on the HBO Max side, which I don't deal with as much.
Okay.
But mobile app security is important. So like connected TVs and that, they're almost closed devices in that they're very, they're not open to, let me just download this app or whatever, right? So they're a little bit more secure. The worst one is obviously a web browser. But as far as mobile app security, I think it is secure. There's some people from HBO Max here that could probably talk about it more than I can.
Okay, very good. And then, Erik, let's talk about Doverunner specifically. What kinds of companies use Doverunner? Where's the sweet spot in terms of the amount of content they have, whether it's by revenue or by minutes, et cetera?
Yeah, so for us, we built our solutions for scale. And so we see a lot of OTT, M&E, sports-based companies utilize our services for doing forensic watermarking, multi-DRM, anti-piracy, as well as mobile app security. But we're starting to see a lot more companies that would traditionally not need to use DRM. So for example, like the educational sector, if you look at a lot of like these well, not LMS, but like these platforms where you might find educational content for just learning new things. It's important to them because this is how they make their money. They're trying to get subscriptions from users signing up for their service to be able to consume their content and learn things and get certificates and what have you. So they now are starting to have a more need to protect the content that's better than just URL signing for the CDN. We've even had cases where, like out of Italy, there was like a small little fashion company that was really trying to protect their content, partially because it was their interest, but also partially because there was a governmental regulation for being able to protect it, and so they're reaching out to us and to be able to protect their content.
It's interesting you mentioned the education piece. Having done some research for a company called Panopto in that space that's primarily VOD content that you could consume later, very concerned about that very thing, that only people who have university credentials can log into the content. But even beyond that now, a number of those companies looking to do live streams so that you can participate in the session with a professor. That's content that has typically not been protected on an educational basis. You're saying that you're getting feedback from those education environments that say we need to protect that content so that it can't be somebody just sort of auditing the class, so to speak.
Right, yeah, and we've seen not so much like universities where they might have like a professor in front of a class, like, holding a lecture of any sort. It's more of like, now, this is not one of our customers, but like a Coursera, where you have this platform where you have like different like levels and different types of, I guess, curriculums of content that you can learn from. Those are the ones that are going to be primarily concerned with like protecting the content because they don't really have they're not an institution where they're
Right,
capturing scholarships and
So
whatnot.
they're primarily online,
Yeah.
and therefore they need to protect the content because that's the only way they make revenue.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
Just real quick, this is probably not a real customer for you, but pirates need to protect their content because pirates steal from pirates.
True.
So I know it's not a big thing, but pirates probably when they restream they would DRM their content because then they don't want other pirates stealing it and then restreaming it.
And you mentioned AB earlier. One of the fascinating things after the World Cup, it came out that there were pirate groups collaborating with other pirate groups to figure out which streams were being sent so that they could restitch a non-protected, and then, as you say, Mark, repackaging it into a protected content piece so that you couldn't hack theirs. So. All right, we're going to open up for question and answer. And Steve will do the lovely Vanna White out here. Who has the first question? We have a gentleman down here, Steve. Raise your hand again so he can. And wait, if you don't mind, until the mic comes so that we can capture that on the recording.
Hi. 50% of my friends use IPTV box.
Mm-hmm.
How can we protect that?
What kind of box? I'm sorry.
It's an IPTV box.
Oh, IPTV.
They pay like $150 a year, and they get everything. They don't need to subscribe to Netflix, HBO, or any live streaming.
Yeah.
So on these IPTV boxes, you're saying that they actually have like apps that have either are available by pirates that they're used to actually watch content. Is that what you're saying?
I can give an example. Like everything is streamed from Canada.
Yeah. So unfortunately, on those particular devices, unless those boxes for the IPTV add like some level of protection so that things can't be side-loaded onto the device itself, the method that you would then use as a content company is to use something like forensic watermarking, where the actual identifiers make it through to the device onto the screen, and as content is actually being played out, you can actually capture the logs on the playout as it's being streamed out, assuming that there is like some sort of contextual ID going along with it to actually pull out the actual like source of the leak.
And it's interesting talking to people. So we sort of have the casual piracy we talked about, the professional piracy. There's this middle ground. I have friends who go to a flea market, and there's a guy at the flea market who will offer those boxes for $130 US a year. And he says, if it breaks down, just bring it back to me and I'll actually, reload the software. So it's that whack-a-mole that you were describing from that standpoint. The other thing is, think back to, I don't know if any of you remember Sling TV back in the day. Bhupen Shah, who actually was the CTO of that company, the whole reason he started that was he wanted to watch, the Premier League cricket here in the States, and he couldn't get it. So he built a box to give to his parents to hook up to their television, and it was a point-to-point scenario, but you could clearly see where we've gone with that now, that it could be a point-to-multi-point. All right, thank you for that question. Next question. All right, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to transition into happy hour. So if you look forward 2 years from now, what are the biggest challenges we're going to see in the security and securing of streams at scale?
Oh boy, that's a really hard question. Just because, like I said, like for pirates, they're just going to continually define new ways of actually defeating any kind of protection you put on content. Yeah, I mean it's and like even then, like the actual technology for which we actually we as companies are actually pushing content out there is going to change too, and so I think it's just going to continue to evolve. I think probably the biggest one right now is we're actually dealing with this right now is compromised CDMs. It's not something that is fully mainstream yet, but it is out there. I think we're going to see them get a lot more sophisticated in how they actually approach this.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be 2 years, but I see potentially the biggest threats to security would be, one is AI, because you'll have AI versus AI.
Yes.
The second one is quantum computing.
Okay.
Because once that starts working, you're going to be able to break things that used
The
to take
decryption.
Yeah, that used to take 100 years, right? You're
Yeah.
going to break it in 5 minutes.
Well, and you mentioned AI, and this is a place where I think it actually could be quite intriguing if you have a system that can receive in multiple streams and do what I was talking about, where it's comparison of A/B. Suddenly, we're having to look at A to Z streams as opposed to A to B streams, because the systems can very quickly analyze what needs to be changed. So I could see AI content generation that looks similar to premium content, almost enough to the extent that you can't tell the difference, which means then the AI systems you build to monitor that have to be significantly more robust. So. All right, one final ask for questions. And if not, I'd like to thank Erik and Mark for being here. And Erik has something that he wants to...
So if you're not familiar, we're going to be hosting a happy hour right after this. For that, please show up. We're going to have drinks there. It'll be a great place to network. I'll be there. You can ask any questions. I don't have alcohol. I have water. But yeah, I can't open this in.
Yeah.
But if he had AI, that would actually be fun.
Cheers. Thank you.
Make sure you make it to the Doverunner happy hour.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much for spending the time with us.